Okay, cool.
All right, so let's just go ahead and jump live right back into it. So, Terrance Blount, fellow podcaster and dad. So, tell us your story, man.
All right, so let me rewind, kind of start from the beginning. So here recently, so I always say that like I have two children, and one of them, Knox, he was our first child, and so his birthday would just happen on November 12th. So it's been
Oh,
awesome. And we were expecting our second child, and so like right now, like I'm sure you heard this whole baby shark phenomenon. Like it just does not stop. I apologize now if that song is stuck in your head, Kyle,
we've got Baby
because it never
Shark,
goes
Daddy
away.
Finger, and all of it stuck in my head right now.
Oh, oh man, yeah, and it's like it's a huge baby shark up in our household. But nonetheless, so like we took this cool picture. We were expecting a second child, and we did what I feel like most like normal parents do is we try to maybe shy away from the first trimester. Well, I was about to go real country there and say trimester.
I feel right
But
at home
anyhow,
with my wife.
look, parts of Georgia really do just I just absorb it.
Oh, yeah.
But nonetheless, so we were really excited, and we tried to kind of keep it hush past the first trimester. Then we would go ahead and announce it, and so we did, and things were going as expected. And then, really, I should rewind just a little bit more and say on about the seventh weekend. My wife was definitely falling ill. So she had fever. We couldn't shake the fever. And she's like, look, I have to go to the hospital. I'm just not feeling well at all. And so we take her to the hospital, and it's the weekend. So it's it's Saturday we go into the hospital, like late Friday night going into Saturday morning.
Okay.
We go to the hospital, and everything seems like just the usual suspects. Like, okay, you have a fever,
Hmm.
no big deal, but we'll watch you. And then of course we had to share with them like, look, we're pregnant, so we want to be very careful
Hmm.
about how we address this. And they end up keeping her overnight, and the jury is still out. Like we felt that it was meningitis, but we got so many different type of reporting back. We'll never be 100% sure, but it looks like that's what it was, and it was a pretty scary thing.
Jeez.
And I mean, yeah, and it was tough because just a little bit more about me personally is I travel so much for work, and so we had like this huge event where like I do a lot of learning and development and marketing sales with Samsung, and so we had this huge event in New York City, and I was one of a team of three to do PR, and I mean we got to the wire where I'm considering really canceling this trip, and so the doctor's like, well, look, things look okay. That's up to you two on how you decide you want to do it. And this is when it really started this roller coaster of emotions and hospital visits.
Yeah.
And so everything looked to be fine. We come back home, and maybe a couple weeks later, my wife starts to bleed a little bit. And so a little bit of bleeding, we weren't really concerned just yet. Like it raised an eyebrow, but nothing really scary. Like, okay, things are brown, meaning blood. I know this is a little graphic, so forewarning for a few of you,
We
but
put
we won't.
explicit warning on it, so it's okay.
Well, good. Okay, Kyle, you already got us covered. And anyway, so it started to pick up a little bit, and about again the first day, just a little bit of spotting, then it turned a little bit of brown, and it started to get a bit heavier. And so then we started to get concerned, and so we go to the doctor, and they try to ease your concerns, but they try to stay very realistic.
Yeah.
And so they want you to keep an eye on it. They want to keep an eye on it, but they don't necessarily want you to panic just yet because even though this is not what they'd say normal per se,
Hmm.
it's something that can still occur. And it happens more often than people may suspect.
Right. Right.
And okay, so all right, so now we understand this. We'll just kind of keep an eye. And I mean, like anytime my wife would go to the bathroom, I mean, it's just going to be a little bit of bleeding.
Hmm.
Well, fast forward between 1 to 2 weeks later, it kept getting heavier and heavier. I mean, it's gotten concerning where, anytime she goes to the restroom, I'm like, okay, like I want to check in on her. Everything okay? Is everything going fine? And needless to say, it started picking up with the hospital visit. So, she'll get a little bit of cramping, which that's when we really started to get concerned. Like, okay, wait a minute. It's one thing if it's a little bit of blood flow.
Yeah.
It's another thing if things, she's starting to cramp. Like, that can't be good. That can't be normal. Let's go in.
Right.
And, so this kind of picked up. This happened for a few weeks. And then the major first hospital visit I'll give you is we went in. She scheduled like an appointment with her, not gynecologist, but it's a
Labor and
leading,
delivery doctor? Or
not labor and delivery. So we went in like for her normal, like baby checkup, but we had to up it because she was just bleeding a bit.
Oh, MFM or whatever, maternal fetal
Yeah,
medicine.
yeah. So we and it'll come to me momentarily. I'll come back to it. But anyway,
Sure.
so like we go to the doctor. I mean, she's bleeding so bad. They're like, you know what? You need to just go visit labor and delivery. And I'll just never forget, like, my heart sank. Victoria's very stressed. And she was telling me, she's like, look, don't you cry right now because if you do it, then I'm going to do it and I'm going to lose it. So I just need you to keep it together. And I'm like, okay, which is tough for me to do because I am that more so emotional father. Like, I don't personally shy away from emotions. I think it's important. It's just a part of my being. But anyway, so I kept it together mainly for her, not for me. And we get in the car, and that was like the longest 35-minute drive to the doctor because like I don't know what to expect. Like when I see the look on that doctor's face, like you need to go to labor and delivery, like that's very concerning.
Yeah.
And so it was a long drive. We didn't want to go to the one down in Gainesville because I know that her normal doctor isn't there, and then we do know the one in Cumming, Georgia. It was a little bit more reputable, and they had a doctor on call
Right.
for these sort of things. And so we get there to see the specialist, and it turns out like, okay, yes, there's a lot of bleeding, but the heart beat's still good, cervix is still good. Which let's pause here for a second. We had so many scares of like her cervix. I mean, they would say like it's dilated as less than 2 centimeters, and all of a sudden it's back near 4 to 5. And I mean, it was just like this emotional roller coaster because Victoria has a really good friend. We'll just call her Kayla. I won't give her full name for obvious reasons. And Kayla, she went through it where she had to deliver her child as well near the same time, around like 16 weeks or so. And I mean, the emotions that she had to go through, and just Victoria experiencing that with her, like that's an experience no parent should have to go through. And so we were kind of fearing that that may be the same thing.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, for a different reason, Kayla happened to be at the hospital, so it was nice for her to have her friend nearby that she could kind of be consoled by because there's not much I can really tell her. I don't know the right
Yeah.
questions to ask the doctor.
Right.
Right? So it's really nice having her friend that unfortunately went through this type of experience, and it turned out like every parent's worst nightmare, that she could be there to kind of walk her through the steps, help her set the proper expectations, and just ask the right questions.
Right.
And so we left the doctor a little bit more optimistic at that time. And so, we went to this pizza place. It's specifically, by the way, it's Stevie B's. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, my wife always craves pizza, but I mean, she goes all in when she's pregnant, right? Like, chicken is out, pizza is in, is what she wants. And so we go, and like, spirits are up. And so we go through a couple more, scares here and there. And I'll never forget, we had one where she woke up in the middle of the night, a lot of bleeding, and I noticed. And by the way, this is to a point now where anytime she gets up in the middle of the night, like I wake up and I can't go back to sleep because I'm just concerned, like, okay, like what are we dealing with now?
Yeah.
Right?
What's
Because
what's gonna happen
again,
next?
yeah, what's going to happen next? Because we're already on pins and needles. And she goes to the bathroom, but she doesn't return. And it's been like 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, like something's not right. So walk in to the room. And before I do that, as I'm making my way, I'm stepping into wetness. And I mean, she bled so much. I mean, it was all on the carpet. It was like just this trail to the bathroom. And I opened the door, and I'm looking, thinking, like, this is it. I mean, there's so much blood. There's just no way. And so, like, I'm starting to kind of freak out internally. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to find, what I'm going to expect, what type of mental state is Victoria going to be in. And so I open the door, and she's got like the heart monitor on. So she's just checking to make sure baby still has a heartbeat. And he still does, right? And he's still in there. And at this point, I just don't know what to say. There's a lot of blood. She looks a little bit in distress, but we have a heartbeat. And so the best thing I can muster up is, okay, look, we're still in the game. Like he still has a heartbeat right now. We should definitely go to the doctor. Like this is not right. And so we get my mother-in-law to come through. We go to the doctor because, we needed to leave Knox somewhere. Like we didn't want to just wake him up in the middle of the night because that's even more chaotic. You want to talk
Right.
about stress,
Yeah.
right? Like we have the stress of the child that's not here yet. Then we have the stress of waking up a 2-year-old that, or almost 2 at this time, that doesn't understand what's going on. So there's just a lot of dynamics there. So
Yeah.
luckily we have family close by. They came in. We go to the doctor, and they're like, yeah, look, it's definitely not normal to have this much blood, that's for sure. And she's passing a lot of clots at this point. So she had some cramping, a lot of clots, a lot of blood. but baby still has a heartbeat. So they keep her in because they want to watch her because her
Yeah.
iron levels in her blood's a bit low.
Right.
And so things are looking a little bit dangerous for her. And of course, if it's not good for mom, it's not going to be good for baby. And so we spent a few days in the hospital. They finally release her from the hospital. When we come home, we were thankful enough to have neighbors that were very supportive, and they had like a whole plan laid out, right? Like they brought over like foods high in iron and protein, all sorts of healthy stuff. And I mean, the whole neighborhood like cooked and brought stuff over.
That's
So
awesome.
it was awesome. Like I cannot thank my neighbors enough. It just helped take a little bit of that pressure and stress off. Normally, believe it or not, I'm the cook, even though I'm the traveler of the family. I feel like I'm always in and out. I do a lot of cooking as well, so it really just took a lot of pressure and stress off. And I kind of refrained from traveling for work for a little bit because I just want to be home to make sure everything's okay.
Right.
And so
And
the
your work
next,
was pretty, I mean, were they
yes,
pretty understanding with it?
oh man, yeah, like my boss, and I'll give out shout out to Brandon Robinson, such a good like he's my country bumpkin Texas Ranger of a boss. Like I love this dude. Like it just doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he's like, look, we'll figure it out. We'll clear your schedule. Like family first, and he really sticks by those values. So I'm
Good.
very thankful for that.
Good.
And so I had some time home and we're watching. So mind you, this is October now, and so we're like going through all these the Halloween sagas, like the whole Michael Myers
Yeah.
situation. We've seen bits and pieces growing up, but we thought it would be cool since doctors give mixed reviews. They say, hey, get bed rest. Some say you don't need the bed rest, like you should continue as normal, maybe be a little lighter, but continue life as normal. So, we had some mixed reviews here and there, but the way we figured it was, okay, we'll have a little fun. It's the Halloween season. Let's watch some of these, films together and we'll
Yeah.
just do some on the couch. And so it's Sunday, we're sitting on the couch, and my wife goes to get up, go to the restroom per usual, but then she had a bit of clear fluid. And she's like, okay, I think my water may have broke because I don't think this is urine. I think this may not be a good thing. And we're like, oh. So same situation, I quickly take my son to my mother-in-law's because they only live like not even 7 miles away. Like they're really
Okay.
close. So I take him over there. She heads to the hospital while I go to drop him off. And then I just meet her there just because
Right.
we didn't want to waste any time. We wanted to be cautious.
Yeah.
And so we get there and, they're trying to test for everything. But as they look through everything, again, things seem to be normal. And so we're not so sure. It's like, well, maybe she could have, slightly peed herself. Like real talk, that happens during pregnancy. Your body, does all sorts of things. So
Oh,
it's a real thing.
my wife's gonna kill me, but yeah, I know about all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like my wife will tell you, like sometimes she still sneezes and maybe pees
Yeah.
just a little. It happens, right? And so I get scared and may pee a little bit. You never know. So, and And so, we're in the hospital for a little bit, again, just to double check it, and at this point, like we have come to an understanding that throughout this entire pregnancy, this is the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically, right, and just to give a little bit of background, and just to be very transparent with everybody, look, I'm personally not a super religious person. I expect everybody's different points of view in religion, but I was like, look, at this point, I'm like, if there is a higher being out there, I've come to the conclusion I'd rather deal with this unknowing, everyday like fear for my child's life situation, but still be in the game. I'll gladly take it, and it's very stressful, and it's gotten so stressful for the second time in my life, Kyle. I've had it's called it's like stress induced alopecia.
I,
And so I've gotten another bald patch like somewhere in the back of my head. I can't see. Thankful for me. I don't care if anyone else sees it.
yeah. It's out of sight, out of mind, right?
Outside of it, 100%. And that even occurred again. And I was like, okay, I know I am definitely really stressed when this occurs because there's only one extreme stressful time I had, like from a work career standpoint, and it happened, and this happened again. But again, I'd rather deal with it. I'd rather lose all patches of hair, all sorts of issues, whatever it may be, rather lose it all, but still be in the game. And I just remember feeling that way. And we go back home, and so this is where it gets to the unfortunate final time. And so and this is where, like, to me it seems like yesterday, and it wasn't that long ago. We're almost at a month at this point because this was October 27th it happened. Here we are the day after Black Friday. It's Saturday, November 24th now. And so, my wife's in bed and she's tossing and turning. She's very uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay, like, are you okay? And she's like, no, I have cramping, and this cramping's not good. It's a little bit stronger than usual. And I'm like, okay, well, do we need to go to the doctor? And she's like, well, let me just wait for a moment. Let me see how I feel. So she laid there, laid there, laid there, and then finally she sits up. She's like, okay, I'm just gonna go to the doctor. It's probably nothing, but let me just go because I'm cramping a bit, and this is really uncomfortable, and it's getting up there onto the scale of things. And so I didn't ask her on the scale. I just knew if she felt uncomfortable enough to go to the doctor, just go. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, look, don't wake Knox, just go, and I'll let you know. And she makes her way, and unbeknownst to me, she tries to call like the midwife at the time. Didn't originally answer, and somewhere halfway through, she answered and was like, "Hey, just take some Tylenol, hot shower, and maybe that'll alleviate it." So then she calls me back, and she's crying a bit. And she's like, "Hey," she's like, "the midwife just called me and said I need to take a Tylenol and a hot shower. I don't know, it seems strong, but I'm going to do so." And so I get out of bed. I get her Tylenol ready, the ones without caffeine, right? You have to be
Yeah.
very specific, the
Oh yeah.
ones you need. And I go pull that up, and I start the shower because I can see her on like Find My Friends where she's at,
Yeah.
and I know she's getting. So I start the shower because I just want to be able to come in, pop some Tylenol, get in the shower, and just try to relax.
Right.
Now she does so, and she's in the shower for a little bit, and then she comes back to the bed, and I can still tell she's really uncomfortable. And then she sits up, and she's like, "Oh fuck, something's really not right." And she's like, "Turn on your phone's flashlight." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so I turn on my phone's flashlight. And of course, she's bleeding again on the bed, which that part, unfortunately, wasn't the uh, unnormal for us, right? Because this has happened so
Right.
often.
Yeah.
But she's like, "No," she's like, "this cramping's bad. I have to go to the hospital. We got to go right now." So luckily, my neighbor, and this is like 1-ish in the morning. My neighbor right next door to us is wide awake, and I'm like, "Heather, like, can you just come over, hang out? Knox is in bed, but we got to go to the hospital. Like, Victoria's really sensing something's wrong." And so, we get into the car. She heads over. We roll on out, and about halfway there, she's like, "I think I'm having contractions." And I just kind of look over, and for me, I'm trying to keep hopeful. And I mean, it's like almost 1 o'clock in the morning. There's hardly any cars out there. I mean, we're rolling.
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, no." She's like, "No, I don't think these are. This is exactly how I felt with Knox." And that is where, for me, my heart started to sink. Right. And so, right now, I have to admit, like, I'm feeling very emotional. And
It's okay.
so, I'm just heading to the hospital as quick as I can. And we get to the hospital, and of course my wife's like, in some serious pain. And they get her in a wheelchair. They're trying to check her in. I can see her, like, I know these are contractions because she's starting to cramp up like she did before. So we get her in the room. The nurse is like really struggling to get her an IV, everything else. I mean, she's extremely uncomfortable. And to me, I'm almost at my breaking point at this point because I can see how uncomfortable she is. I have a very good understanding that this is likely going to be it. I'm going to have to face my worst fear. And so, she's on the bed. The midwife comes in at one point. Her name's Liz. Really great. Really great. Liz comes in, and, they're checking her vitals and everything else. And at one point, Victoria's like, she said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I knew that she wanted me to contact her mom because she felt like this is going to be it.
Yeah.
So I go to the bathroom to call her mom, and I'm like, "Hey, just so you know, we're pretty sure we're going to go into labor." And her mom's like, "Oh, okay." They want to head up, and just be supportive no matter what happens. So I get off the phone, I walk back into the room, and I forget the exact numbers, but I remember Liz specifically saying, like, "Look, she's dilated, and you're going to have this baby." And I was like, "Okay, well, what can we do?" She just looked at me. She's kind of, I guess, letting it sink in. And she's like, "There's nothing we can do."
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was like, "Okay, excuse me. I'm going to step out for a second." And so I stepped out, and, I went to the bathroom for a bit. And I can remember specifically just letting out like a silent scream, if that makes any sense, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
out. I don't want to, cause anybody else any distress in the hospital because I can imagine like a dude screaming like that's different.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like, this is it, and there's nothing I can do. And to me, there's nothing worse than that feeling of helplessness. So I go back, and Victoria refused to push. Like even the whole time, like the doctors asked her, do you feel the urge to push? And she's like, yes. And she's like, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. And before we know it, I mean, just a couple minutes, we deliver little Kai. And so, Liz is, opening up the placenta to get him out. I see him, and I mean, that's when it's just like, for me, my whole world crashed. And at that point, it was almost surreal, right? And
Yeah.
I'm looking at him, and I can see him, and I know, obviously, at this point, and I shouldn't say obviously, it's for me, you could take it either way, right? Like any parent, you gotta live with it however it may occur. But I guess I am kind of glad, like, I didn't see him, like, let's say, struggling for his breath or something of that nature, because I think I just would have lost it on the spot. But I remember specifically asking the nurses, like, do the bare minimum of what you need to do, and I just need you to leave, right? And it's not anything against you all, but I'm not well right now. I need everybody to get out.
Hmm.
And so they totally understood it, and we just wanted, our time. And so they did. They rolled us up into the room. They moved us because, I mean, we literally delivered Kai, and that's his name that we given him, because we give him a name Kai because, I mean, look, he's definitely our son. And so, they put him in a basket for us and everything else, and brought him into, and we moved again from the examination room where he was born
Hmm.
into an actual delivery room. And I mean, so many emotions happen, right? It's like, the fact that you're in the delivery room, I mean, in and of itself, that seems so, bittersweet,
Yeah.
because that's where things should go and where things should go right, but it's not, nothing's gone right. And I just remember when I got the hold of, man, like I just lost it, right? Because I realized, like, in a sense, and even though, like, I know logically, like, it's not our fault, there's nothing we can do, that we did everything that we could do, you still feel a sense of a failure as a parent,
Yeah.
because the idea is you're supposed to bring the child in the world, they're supposed to survive, and they're also supposed to outlive you, and you will do anything at all costs, for your children. And to come to the fact that this did not happen, and that, everything we were really excited for, just knowing everything from, like, I mean, all this floods of emotions coming in, like the birth of my first child.
Hmm.
This is not how that occurred, right? And so there's things that you don't forget. And just to rewind for a second, I'm already a little messed up and jaded because, I even had to bury my youngest brother, right? Who
Right.
just wasn't feeling well. We thought he just had, like, I don't know, like a real bad, I don't want to say flu, but like, flu-like symptoms, right? Pretty
Yeah.
much there. And, even going through all that, like, this is it again, rehashed up again. And now I have to share a type of experience, not necessarily the same, but again, the loss of a child that my parents had to go through. And now I'm going through the same thing, right? And I'm watching my wife go through it. And that was just extremely, extremely tough. And even to this day, like, I'm like, look, I'd sever one of my limbs. I'd rather have it sawed off. I would face one of my worst fears, which, by the way, is because I do so much international travel too. Like, my worst fear is one of those jet lines going down over the Pacific Ocean and getting stuck out and stranded in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's my worst fear. I'd rather encounter that than to have deal with the whole loss of a child. So it just shows you as a parent, for those of you that are listening who have been through it, likely you know what I'm talking about. And then those of you that are not, maybe you can semi-relate, maybe you cannot, and you're trying to imagine. But I mean, these are just really tough emotions, really tough feelings, and it just brought me to my knees and it severed me there. And I thought, again, at the age 29, losing my brother, and there's a very specific story. I won't necessarily dive into that, but the feeling hitting rock bottom and then kind of rising up then again and then being pushed back down to it. I'm like,
Hmm.
man, like, how many blows can life deal to you? And it made me, I mean, it's taken me all sorts of places, Kyle, right?
Oh, I
So
trust me. I know, man. I know.
yeah, you do know, unfortunately. And this is something where I can say, man, in life, like, we're always trying to be understood, right? And just follow me here for a second. Whether people disagree politically, or there's different professional things, or if you're trying to explain something, normally as a human being, we're always trying to convey that idea and be understood. And this is one of the things where I purposefully want nobody to understand me. Nobody should
Right.
have to understand what I'm going through.
Exactly. Exactly. You never want, I mean, this is something you never wish, upon your worst enemy. And I guess what I can say is like, just since it's at that point in the story, like you feel like you just made, like when you're in that delivery room, because as you were saying that, I was starting to get choked up because I was starting to think about the delivery room part for Garrett. And I remember thinking like, man, that was just a hard left into the median, and that was it. But further along in the grieving process, and further as we go, longer and longer with Garrett, after Garrett's passing, it wasn't necessarily a hard left into the median and everything stopped. It was an off ramp that's really fucking steep and
Hmm.
really narrow, and you got to go either really fast or you got to go really slow, but you keep going forward. Somehow or another, you just keep going forward. It doesn't feel like that right off the bat. You kind of feel like you feel like you're crashed, but you're really not. I mean, just even doing this right now, and anybody listening, like you can never move on, but you can go forward, and there's a big difference there. And right here, and having talked to you, Terrance, before, I kind of know that you're on the going forward path, whether you know it or not from what you've told me
Oh yeah.
before. You're definitely on the going forward path. You're not over it, and we never get over it, but you're on the going forward path, which is that's the biggest key that I've found, at least. And there's a lot of relatable things in your story that I think a lot of people are gonna have, and that delivery room thing, man, that got me. That
No, no, unfortunately, and it's one of those where, before I go into perspective, because that's a point I think that would be important to touch on. One thing I will say is, and I love the way you word it too, because you're right. Like, it's so interesting because when my brother passed away, I isolated myself, right? I didn't know how to grapple and deal with it.
right.
And when I had to go to his wake, and not only just his wake, even when one of his good friends like discovered like he was not waking up, and she didn't know how to articulate it, but I mean, she was just crying, and I could barely understand her, and I had that gut feeling, and I get there, and I'm having to face like the fact, like, look, I may be 29, but my youngest brother, like, he's gone. How do I process that? And I totally isolated myself. And then when Kyle was literally, unfortunately born and passed simultaneously, I dealt with it a little differently. And for the first time, with the help of my wife too, let me tell you that, because she wanted to, for her, a part of her grieving process and her moving forward process was to be able to talk about it, but not. Victoria didn't want to necessarily talk about it like verbally, like maybe you and I are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
She more so needed to write about it. So writing is her way of getting it out.
Yeah.
And so for me, I come to the conclusion it's not necessarily, it's like it's moving forward, but it's also, I consider it
Mm-hmm.
moving with the pain, moving with the experience. Because to your point, I'm never going to get over it.
No.
And when people say, "Oh, well, time heals all wounds," I'm
Fuck
like,
that.
"Look, this is yeah." I'm like, "That's not going to heal this."
No.
And people say, and let me put it out there just to be super clear, especially for people that are listening that have never experienced this. There's nothing wrong with you trying to say like, if there's anything I can do, let me help. Like, we understand, like, everyone has good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
However, nobody can do anything for me. And I started to get very verbal to letting people know that. And I would say things of this nature. So let's say a coworker, well, Terrance, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. And I would respond with a, thank you so much for, really caring, really being a close friend, and really trying to do something for me. But let me just articulate to you, like, there's nothing you or anyone can do for me, because what I want and what I would have you do is nothing that any of you are capable of doing. I just want my son.
Yeah.
And people say, well, he's, in a better place, whatever it is. I'm like, no, the place I want him is in my hands.
Yeah.
Right. And not to challenge anybody, religiously, because again, everybody has, I think, like a good viewpoint of where they're meaning well. But people say, oh, well, he just needed to be, or God wanted him with him. And I'm like, well, look, I understand where you're coming from, but I want my child with me.
Yeah.
I just don't see the purpose of going through this pain.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if he's there, almighty, keep him with you, right? But for me to have to go through this turmoil like that, to me is just it's just something I won't, and I can't and won't accept. I just won't.
No, and me neither. Anytime, and for anybody listening, the intentions we know are good. Don't ever tell anybody who's lost a child that it's God's plan.
Oh,
Just don't fucking do it.
oh, please.
Because if you want to set off, if you want to make a woman, like a mom, cry, that's how you make her cry. If you want to almost get punched in the face, tell that to a dad. Because
And by the way, Kyle, thank you for keeping it real. Kyle, you're definitely keeping it more so.
because I one of my mentors in hunting is a preacher, and he's even told me, he's like, this isn't God's plan. Like, he's like, and so, like, he's got God's ear at that point, and he's like, so just don't do it. Just
Yeah, please don't.
it's I mean, we know the intentions are good and it can slip, let it slide. But if you've listened to this, don't ever say that to somebody, because it's not God's plan.
Exactly. And it's a double-edged sword, right? And we have to remember, even as the parents we're dealing with it and we're going through like a parental hell, also try to have some, sympathy for the other person as well. Because look,
Yeah.
there are no words. And by the way, this is something interesting that I've learned. I felt like I noticed some friends have kind of come out of the woodwork, because this is something, and this is what I really respect about you, Kyle. A lot of guys, we don't talk about this. And I noticed that my male friends that have been through this, the way I can almost 100%, and not with absolutes here, because I don't believe in many absolutes, but almost 100% just to the T, when they say, I have no words, I understand and I have no words. I had a couple of friends kind of borderline that reaction, and come to find out they've been through it and they never discussed it.
Yeah.
And I find it so interesting. And look, I will never judge a parent, because look, some parents move on differently. For me, or I should say for us, Vitor and I have come to the conclusion, look, we're going to acknowledge this is our second child. He will always be with us. By the way, love your tat, Kyle. I think this will maybe my first. Right now, I just got my wife made me this bracelet with Kai on it, and I literally wear it with me everywhere. So the longest piece of jewelry, other than my wedding ring and my watch that I typically wear. But anyway, it's just my way of honoring and never forget. And I know even. Oh, it makes me emotional again, just even think about it. When Victoria wrote in one of her posts, she's like, look, she's like, I even understand, like, this is going to be a lifetime event for me. And many of you reading this, you'll feel for me for a moment, but you'll move on with your lives, but we won't. And I mean, that was just like a real, punch in the gut as well, because there's some truth to it, and we'll maybe highlight here a little bit on some, I don't really find any silver linings, but I just try to do something proactive. But even this Christmas, I'm sorry, not Christmas yet, Thanksgiving, I had a friend, Eric, I'll just leave his first name. Him and I, we weren't even necessarily like best friends, but like, man, like he passed away in a car accident near Christmas, expecting twins, and just recently got married.
Jeez.
And I remember when that happened, I was just like, like gut wrenching, right? Like, I can't understand like what his wife is going through. Lost her husband and has two twins on the way, and right before the holidays, like, how's she going to feel for the rest of her life? Lost an aunt to cancer, and it's really like my uncle's wife. And then my brother. And so every holiday, I can't help but to write them. Right. So, I write them on Facebook, and I know they're not alive and they're not going to see it, but it's a part of my process, because it's an ongoing process. So why people kind of, forget to a degree, not everyone does. So I don't want to paint with a broad brush there, but this is something that for all of us parents to experience, is like everything is now extremely sensitive. And so I'm always sensitive to that. And I'm not going to go down this dark road, but one thing I can say, and again, I can't say a silver lining, because to me, there's nothing. I'd give up everything, start from ground zero to have our son back with us. But I try to keep in perspective, like, from kids in Yemen that are starving to death, that I can't imagine being a parent that can't provide for my child, to people that are going through it, and they're going through it in the worst of ways. And if you don't mind me just to deviate just for 1 second, Kyle.
Go ahead.
So at work, I had a coworker come up to me, and he did the same. He was doing the same thing. He's like, Terrance, look, there are no words I can express for what you've gone through. And I was like, okay, like and I'm thinking to myself, like, what did this guy, what did he go through? And his name's Daniel. I'm like, what did Daniel go through in his life to carefully word this out? And at first I'm thinking he's just trying to acknowledge it, right? And I'm very appreciative. And this is in Seattle. So we got together for a work event. We had a major meeting. We're in Seattle. We're at dinner. And he moved from one side of the table all the way over to the other side. And we're talking for a minute. And he's like, well, look, I can't say I know exactly what you're going through. But what I can say is, for me, when I went through the experience, I went on a family trip, so it was me, my wife, my son, and my daughter. And we're heading from like Tennessee to Florida. And he's like, and then this tractor trailer out of nowhere. And the moment he said this tractor trailer, I thought of a couple years ago, I heard of this coworker. And he lived in Tennessee. He transferred to Dallas eventually. And I'm literally just putting us together. And this guy was on a family vacation, tractor trailer out of nowhere slammed into the back of his car. It killed his 4-year-old daughter, and it killed his wife, and it badly injured him, and it injured his son a bit. So his son survived. He survived barely, and when he was coming back to consciousness in the hospital, they had informed him that he lost his 4-year-old daughter and his wife. And I'm thinking to myself, and again, everybody's own personal hell is bad, but the perspective it gave me was like, I still can't imagine from this guy. And so while I will never say, thankful for certain things, because again, I just feel some type of way as a parent, like nobody should have to ever experience these losses. Again, it just severed my heart again for this guy. And I'm just imagining, like, how is this guy even sitting here in front of me talking about this?
Yeah.
And he's like, look, and he's told me, he's like, look, I feel like I understand where you're coming from to a degree of, because I told him very straightforward. I'm like, look, I'm going to be, in a sense, like, emotionally injured for life, right? Mm-hmm. Again, where these things are never going to heal and I'm never going to be okay. And when friends even ask me, Terrance, how are you? I'm like, I'm not okay. And I think people really taken aback by that.
Yeah.
So not to go too far over the map, but let me now start to bring it back in. The point is, people are going through all sorts of things, and it made me start to think, how often is it, and especially for us guys, right? Because I feel like, unfortunately, socially, females, you definitely have your own struggles of sometimes, like, they always tell the guy, you got to stay strong for your family. You got to stay strong for your family. Right. Well, look, I'll tell you, everybody out right now, no, I am not always strong for my family. Sometimes I am the one that has to be carried because I'm a human being. I really love the shit out of my kids, right? Like, yeah. I would do anything for my kids. And you know what? Sometimes for me to be strong, I have to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I have to be acceptable of just how I feel and acknowledge it. And so, no, I'm not okay. No, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But that is also my strength. It's not a weakness.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like a cock and reload type of situation where you can't be high tense. Just all that tension all the time. Where you have to be completely strong all the time. Like you have to kind of relax it a little bit at times. And it's nice when, and for you, it certainly sounds this way, and it's the same way for me and most of the guys that have been on here, where their wives kind of take over a little bit. Yeah. And and I've said it, I think I've said it on every podcast, they're the stronger ones hands down. Like we may have to like be the strong front, but our wives after going through this are definitely a million times, they are Herculean in strength. And sometimes like when we have to kind of like, kind of give up that role for a little while, all of our wives, everyone I've talked to, their wives slide right in and take care of things until we can kind of get our mind right, get our shit together. So yeah, it definitely, like having a strong wife is the most amazing thing in that situation.
And I wonder your perspective as well, because I will tell you, like, I can't imagine, right? Like to a degree, like I get so jealous of my wife because like when we're in the stages of being pregnant. And yes, I do say we because it's a shared experience. I know I'm not carrying a child. I know I'm not going through everything that my wife goes through. However, it is still, especially from a parenting perspective, whether I will go get whatever she wants to eat, I will draw her shower, draw her a bath, I will take care of whatever she needs because it's an experience that you share together, right?
Hmm.
So I'm talking from a human, pregnancy experience, not just necessarily the female one. But I can't imagine like growing, this beautiful entity like inside of you, right? This being,
Yeah.
and then having to separate. Even my wife, she took it harsh for a little bit. She's like, she's like, first trimester, there's usually like issues with baby,
Hmm.
right? DNA, there's some sort of abnormality, and it just baby wasn't going to be.
Hmm.
But second trimester, and I'll never forget the way she said it. She's like, second trimester, it's on mom, and she's like, it's on me, and just how she felt, and I can't imagine, like here I'm on the outside, I'm just doing what I can. I can't imagine like the type of guilt that she's had to battle with knowing that to a degree like her body couldn't support, right? And
Yeah.
even though she's done everything she could do, and same thing even for like moms that are listening to this that have been through that, like you've done everything you could do, and it's logical, and you still you can't help sometimes but to want to blame yourself. And just watching my wife go through that and knowing there's nothing I can say or do for her, that was a very painful experience for me,
Yeah.
right? And I was really concerned because between you and I and the podcast, like I I have and I say have because it's still continuous. I still have some issues with even us trying again. Like I know I want to try again, but I mean, I remember specifically that thought going through my mind, like, can I go through this again? And I still don't know like my limitations of doing this because again, I'm a very like emotional parent. I'm a very emotional dad, and maybe I got it through my mom because without going into too much family issue, like I'm super close to my mom because my mom had to carry the weight of raising three boys, and while I love my dad, look, my dad was not there the way he should have been through our young childhood
Hmm.
all the way up to right to our adulthood. He didn't carry and be the parent that he should have been. My mom did. And so maybe I'm very just sympathetic slash empathetic this way because there's just a special bond I have with mom. And so watching my wife go through this is just, to me, it's just heart wrenching, right?
Yeah.
Again, that feeling of helplessness for me is just one of the toughest things I have to deal with because when and I don't want to get too far off because I know sometimes just all these emotions and thoughts come in.
No, it's okay. I love rabbit holes, so.
Oh, good. And by the way, feel free to stop me anytime. Like, there's a good point here because I can always catch back up. But I remember when Kai was born and we lost him. We were going through everything. Again, my awesome boss stepped in, and I had like major work events coming up, and he's just like, they're off your calendar. He's like, I don't want you to worry about it. I don't want you to even necessarily respond to this message if you don't want to. You stay away as long as you have to. Everything will be fine here. Contact me when you feel you need to. Which
Yeah.
again, I mean, I can't speak of my boss enough. Brandon Robson, awesome. That's a
Yeah.
shout out. That's love shout out to him.
And
But
anybody here who's like, I mean, and it may be a very few selected in the audience that are listening, but anybody who's an employer and who has had an employee go through this, you are not doing anybody a service by expecting them back to work quicker. I mean, whether it be medical field, sales, anything. There's no way that I think anybody can perform after taking 2-3 days of bereavement and then going back to work. Some people might need to do that, but when someone goes through this, let them tell you when they want to come back and make it as easy as possible for your employee to do it. My employer did it, and it's a government institution, and my employer did it, which means that anybody has the option to be able to do it, and that you will get so much. It helps the employee out. It will help out your business, and if you think I'm lying, R. Glenn Kelly has a whole book about it that he writes, and the whole speaker series about it, where in the workplace, this is a whole can of worms that it's sensitive, and to have a boss like you have bosses like I've had that have been super understanding and let you take up as much time as you need, like that is monumental in helping like the healing process, or just kind of getting to a point where you can function in the real world again.
oh man, and look, and I couldn't have said it better myself. And I mean, remember there are no companies. There are because companies are what? It's literally a
People.
conglomerate of people. Exactly. And without people, you have no company. You have no corporation. So while the job matters, it has to be the choice of the parent that is going through this. And so like I took maybe the opposite for a lot of people. So when my boss did that, I thanked him, but I was like, Brandon, I have to go to work. And so, and I'll share with you a little
Yeah.
bit of that. So, and again, for anybody that's listening, remember the choice is yours. If you're not ready, don't go.
Yeah.
If you feel that you need to, then by all means do go. But let me distinctively point something out because Brandon pointed out a good thing. He's like, look, it's like, Terrance, I just don't want you to feel like you have to run away from your, your situation.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And yeah, and I was like, you know what? And I totally respect where he's coming from. And then I had to kind of counter with a Brandon. The way I feel right now is that and again, it's really back to the helpless thing. It's just an internal issue that I'm dealing with. But I'm like, Brandon, what I love about my work is that there's so many problems I can solve. There's so many people I can help, and there's a lot of things I can do. The problem with what I'm going through is there is no solving this.
No.
And I need to kind of work with it in the background. So it's just like the best way, maybe I can give an analogy of this. This is like when you're really trying to solve an issue and you've been at it for an hour or two or whatever, and you can't get past it. Sometimes you just got to go take a drive, wash the dishes, do something else, and it hits you.
Right.
And for me, I needed to go through that with my emotions because I was already very self-aware and very keen to the fact that this is never going to go away from me, right? And that I needed to be reminded that there are things that I enjoy to do and that I can't be in this very dark place because it is in my nature to really go to a dark place. People on the outside say, man, Terrance, you're so optimistic. And there's some truth to it. But let me be very transparent. I am also a very pessimistic person. I go both ways sometimes. I get extreme, and I'm always having to walk myself through like a self-check, a self-diagnostic to remind myself that things will be okay to a degree and that there are things I can still love and still do. And so to use a little bit of the other guy's story that I shared with you that was in the hospital when he woke up from that coma, and again, I'm not giving his full name, so I don't mind sharing some of these things here. But and maybe you should talk to this guy. But anyway, he felt like he wanted to die. He said, and it's interesting because I can understand that, but at the same time, it's like I have this other kid, right? And he kind of came to this conclusion, like a doctor kind of walked him through that and helped him. And look, I go to a dark place. If I didn't have my kid Knox, because people did the same thing. Hey, Terrance, don't go to work. We'll watch your son. If there's anything we can do, we'll watch him so you and Victoria can be alone. And I'm like, look, no, I don't want to be alone. Like, Knox is the only joy for me, especially immediately after everything happened. He was the only joy that really kept me together. And I really had to kind of like bond with the things that I loved because I knew I was just not on a good path. I'm just not.
Yeah.
And it made me think, and this is a very dark road, but I'm just going to be very honest. Look, if you would ask me, especially prior to my brother passing away, I, to a degree, can understand, like, why do people fall into alcoholism? Why do people fall into drugs? All these sort of things. And then as life kind of hits you here and there, even though I'm not there yet, I look at it and I can say to myself, you know what? I'm starting to see why people go down these dark paths. And now I'm starting to question myself, like my own judgment on it as a human being. Like, am I too harsh on these people? Like, what is it that they had to go through? And now that's the point in life where I'm at now, where I'm still strong enough to deal with these things head on because I realize that I'm, in a sense, weak enough to where I know that I'm going to have these periods. Like, I'll publicly break down. Someone asks me something, I will straight up cry in a restaurant, tears streaming down, and I don't give a flying fuck.
No, you don't. You never can.
Anything. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to let it be. And people say, sometimes they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring these emotions. I'm like, no, don't be sorry. I want to talk about it because A, it's a healing process for me, and it may not be for everybody, but it is for me. But for B, I want people to know about it because I'm very now aware that there are many people that are going through things and they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe this will be a rabbit hole you want to go down, so I'm going to pause in a minute. I distinctively remember being on that plane from Seattle coming back home, and I'm looking around, I'm like, People wave, people say nice things. I'm smiling, they're smiling. And little do they know, just recently, I lost my child.
Yeah.
And there was this guy, and I have to admit, like I said, I lost it. We're on this flight. I have my headphones on. I hear this kid crying the whole time. This is like a later flight,
Hmm.
right? Because this is not from Seattle. This is from San Jose specifically. And this lady is like 2 rows behind me, and daughter's crying and whatnot. And I remember specifically thinking to myself, like, man, like how many times, even as a single dude, like you might find it annoying, like if a kid cries like forever, you're like, oh my God, this kid's crying,
Yeah.
right? Good thing I got noise cancellation, whatever it may be. And I stopped to myself, I'm thinking, man, like what would I would do anything to hear Kai's cry.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like anything. I don't care where it is and who it annoys. Like I would do anything to hear his cry. And so at one point I had to get up to go to the restroom. I'm getting up to go to the restroom. And I look at the lady, and I smile at her and I wave. And her response was, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh, don't be sorry. And I kid you not, Kyle, this dude sitting next to her was cursing under his breath and was pissed. And I looked at him and I'm starting to kind of pull the situation like this guy's really upset. And then he just kind of looked at me and just kind of like angrily shook his head. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And I was like, you know what? Hold on, back up for a second. And I took off my headphones. And I was like, look, your child crying right now is a blessing. And I was like, I wouldn't give a shit what anybody else on this plane. And I make it very verbal. And maybe it was a bit far, but again, I'm just in this place. And I was like, you know what? They can afford noise cancellation headphones. But you know what'll really humble you? It'll really humble you when you lost a child and you would do anything to hear that kid. So you know what? That's a blessing. So I wouldn't care what anybody has to say. You're a good mom. And kids up on a plane, they were all kids too. Nobody would want to be in this situation. It's
Yeah.
not like Delta makes this comfortable or any plane, Boeing manufacturer, anybody. It's just the way it is.
Right.
But you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And the flight attendant looked like a combination of horrified but then relieved. And when I was walking back, she waved me over and she's like, you know what? I'm so glad you said that because that guy right there, we tried to move him and he felt he shouldn't have to be moved, that they were the ones inconveniencing him. And so I had all sorts of emotion for feeling for this mom, being angry right at this guy, but then trying to also understand that he's just ignorant, but there's like this weird turmoil
Oh
because
yeah. It's like, how far do you push it?
yeah, you know what I'm saying, Kyle? Like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just tough. I don't know if you've ever been through something of that, or maybe even talked to somebody that has been.
It's I've had a lot of unique experiences. Maybe nothing to exactly like that, but certainly to different, to just different things that escalate. And it's weird because now I guess I think I speak now to the point where I'm at with everything is I can talk to people and I love. There's a few different things I'll go through here. So I love telling Garrett's story. Like and it used to like really choke me up and everything,
Hmm.
but now, and one particular instance, and this happens all the time now. I competed in an event, trained to hunt, and I did that. I mean, that was my therapy, and I did a commercial for them, for it and everything. But I remember crossing the finish line, and the guy who runs it, Kenton Claremont, is just a class act dude. They kind of catch you right at the finish line because you're carrying these giant pack, and they kind of help you take it off and everything. And he's like, "How was that?" I just turned to him. I was like, "I did that for my son." He's like, "Oh, is he here?" I was like, "No, he's not." He's like, "Oh, you're gonna see him back home." I'm like, "No." He goes, and he kind of gave me this look like, "What do you mean?" And I told him the story, and that was the first time I kind of realized like I love telling Garrett's story, and I gotta you gotta kind of tell it to people who don't really understand it and kind of ease them down a little bit. And
That's good
you
advice.
almost kind of gotta like catch him a little bit. And he's a big dude. I mean him and I are about the same. He's a little bit bigger than me, so he's a kind of a big dude. So like emotionally, I kind of had to catch him a little bit, but show him that like he put together an event that helped me get through everything, and now I get to tell him about how that helped me. And it's that might be kind of all over the place, but it's just really cool to be able to kind of like tell the story and make someone understand and not have them break down at the same time, and not really like give them a haymaker of a punch.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
I like good.
it was just a cool feeling to have. And now, like after that, that was the first time I really felt that way. And now every time I tell Garrett's story, it's just like I'll tell it to someone who's cutting my hair, and like they'll ask about the logo on the hat, and now it's just like regular conversation for me. And every time I have that conversation over and over and over and over again, and I talk without coming up for air, as my wife says. So it's just really cool to be able to just talk about it. And I never thought I could. I never thought I could, talk about it with strangers like that. Now I just love telling. And like anybody I'm walking down the street, I meet them within 5 minutes. They know that my son has passed away, but these are all the things that have happened since then. So that's it.
To me, I think that's awesome, and I really like your approach to it. Like, I feel like that's something I can take back with me is, like, storytelling is everything. Because I mean, think about it, your life is a story. Everything we do to a degree is a story, and I would, in a sense, kind of hate for it that for all of our lost children, the story can't just be they were born and died. There's so much more to that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, when you think about like, my wife has this very, it's just it's super sweet. I'm going to maybe chop it up a little bit, but it's like, I carried you for every second of your life, and now I'll carry you, on for every second of mine. Right. And it's just a super sweet thing. And it's these things affect you. And even though that, Garrett's not here, a lot of people that you've talked to, and even for those of you that are listening, your children might not be here either, their impact can still be felt. Yeah. And to me, I think there's a sense of beauty in that. And there shouldn't be any shame. There's still going to be some sadness, but there is still a little joy in that. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, like just for some forward-thinking things I want to do, like that's why I really love your podcast. Like, I'm very thankful that you had the commitment, right, the courage to really put yourself out there and talk about these things. Like, it's almost like your contribution back, and it really helps parents like myself and those out there really cope and talk about it, and try to be at a better place with it. Because it's just like fear. When you're doing something, some people are like, oh, how do you get rid of fear? And it's like, you never get rid of fear. Fear is always going to be in the passenger seat, but that's just it. Fear is in the passenger seat, but I'm driving. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's like a similar thing for me. It's like, look, my mourning and my, being upset, because, there's always going to be this sadness, this very slight anger for me of losing my child and feeling like, I'm never going to hear his voice, never going to hear him call me dad, like all these things that really rip away at me. However, I'm not just going to let that go and in a sense just kind of move on. That's where I come with the whole move with. I'm taking all of that with me. I want that baggage because to me, a bit of it is beautiful, and I want to do something with it.
Right, and it's defining you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's defining what you're doing,
Absolutely. And so there's different ways, that I'm personally trying to explore and come up with different things that I can do. I know, like, for instance, I want to do a donation, like at the hospital. Something that really tore me up, and I don't know how you dealt with it and some others, and I'm always curious to hear these things, but one thing that really ripped me apart in the hospital, kind of go back to that experience. So, when we got the hold Kai, and I mean, like, I lost it for a period of time. One thing I did that was maybe unconventional, and some people may be shocked by it, and they just maybe didn't have the courage to ask me, but I remember telling Victoria, when she was kind of in her shop, but she was doing okay, I was like, look, I got to ask you. I feel the need. I want to go home and see Knox. Are you okay with me leaving for the hospital for a bit? Because I don't know if I can honestly just sit here. Yeah. Like, I needed to kind of get away for a bit. She had an understanding. She totally understood. And she didn't feel like I was just leaving her hanging. Because I don't think that's a conventional thing to do. Like, most people, I can tell, like, they're a little like, oh, man, you left the hospital? It's like, yes, I needed to leave. And so I went and, I went by my son's crib, and I just laid there for a bit and cried. And then when he woke up in the morning, then we went back to the hospital. And I remember, they will let you, they didn't put a time limit on how much time we spent with Kai, but there was something so hurtful of the fact that, like, they had to put him on ice, and I'm like, look, here's my newborn child here, and it's like, I know that in a sense, like, man, like, he's decomposing, right? Like, it's just so harsh. Mm-hmm. And it was very upsetting to me. And I was like, what do we even do from here? Like, usually hospitals, hey, here's your child, and then 3 days later, especially when it's your first child, you're like, oh my God, are they really gonna let us like run away with this child? Like, do they trust me?
Yeah.
And but now everything's flipped upside down. I was like, what do I do? Like, I can see his skin drying out a little bit and whatnot, and it's very traumatizing to me because, again, I'm just being reminded while I'm trying to enjoy my very few family photos I'm gonna have of all four of us, like is making me like reface it over and over and over again. I'm like, my child should not have to be on ice.
Yeah.
And so I was very upset. And I was like, well, what do we do? And they're like, well, you know, um, we can cremate him for you if you like, but if we do that, you can't keep his ashes. And I remember, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I can't keep. So it's not like I can take him home because you can't. I can't keep his. Like, what do you even mean? And so, and I don't know this 100%. So let me just be very clear on this.
Sure.
I'm just assuming that maybe they just cremate, and maybe a lot of them together, or something. I don't know, but there was no way I was going to leave that hospital without my child. Like,
Yeah.
there's just no way. Like, you're gonna have to call the police. Like, it's gonna get bad at
Yeah.
this point. It's like, and I can feel like I'm starting to unravel again
Hmm.
because I'm like, I don't know that my options aren't clear to me. I don't know really what's going on. I don't know what to expect. And thankfully, one of the nurses, quickly piped up like, well, you can call like a funeral home service or
Oh,
whatever.
okay. So,
And so I was like, okay, that's good. So, I called the same one, bittersweetly that, my brother went to. And so the cool thing is, and I didn't realize this, but there's actually quite a few funeral homes that will cremate your child for free.
yeah.
And I want to say that because, look, I don't know everybody's economic standing, but these things can be really expensive. And it just tore me up, Kyle, to even think like thankfully I'm decent off, right? Like,
Hmm.
I'm doing very good for myself. I mean, look, I certainly don't have money growing on trees, right? Like, I'm not making it rain up in the Blunt household, Kyle.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine, like, there are parents out there that can't afford this, and what do they do?
Right.
They just have to let their child go. And Kyle, like, I almost lost it there. And I was like, okay, so a part of my giving back is, and I know the hospital has limited information, like they can't and shouldn't share with me, but if I find, especially around like his birthday, something I want to do every year is try to find a family that unfortunately is in the same circumstance. I don't need to meet them. They don't need to speak to me, but somebody's in that situation. I want to make sure they can take their child home.
Yeah.
And look, I can't afford to do this for, everybody, but even if I can help some here and there, it's just a way of me giving back. Because, man, like, how I can't imagine
No way.
somebody not affording to be able to take their child home. Like, that's horrible.
I know, and I thought the same thing. I remember thinking, like, we've got all this family around. Amanda's, her parents and brother and sister in law came in from Kentucky. Like, we had all this help, and like my parents and her parents, they were taking care of everything financially. Like, anything that had to be taken care of was being taken care of. But I remember thinking, like, how do people, like, in this hospital alone, like, there's a pretty, upper middle class, socioeconomically, like, can afford something like this, but then there's a community right next door that I know can't, and they're all in the same hospital. It's like there could be someone in the next room that can't, that doesn't have the support system, doesn't have the financial support to deal with what we're dealing with right now. And that whole financial thing, you know, I mean, I'd love to look into it a hell of a lot more, because I'm sure there's a whole lot of, a whole bunch of can of worms to open up with just that. After, once you leave the hospital, like, you got the hospital bills. It's like the just hits just keep coming for people who can't afford it. So I think that's incredibly amazing that you're looking into doing that for even if it's for one family a year, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, because I just can't imagine. And so it's important to talk about like all the processes and things that we go through, because I mean the immediate is very hard, and I know like Victoria was in shock for a long time. Like, the whole time she was in hospital, she was in shock. So even though I know she wasn't quite right, like on the outside looking in, you might think like, oh, she seems to be dealing with this very well. And when we left the hospital, that's when it really hit her.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think it's really important to talk about those different types of processes, because it's just things that people don't think about. And for the first time, and when I brought Knox, I'll never forget this. And I know we briefly talked about this at one point. I watched this. It's like a set of grandparents. They're bringing in this baby seat, and it hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is how those parents feel when they look at you. And in a sense, like I'm going to tell you right now, like I'm envious that somebody is getting to bring their child home. And in a sense, I don't the same way.
Oh yeah.
And while I'm extremely thankful for my child Knox, right, that I have him with me, like that was such a good experience, it's changed everything for me because I'm now thinking, you know what? The same day that that happened to him, someone else lost their child, and they went through the same experience that we went with Garrett or that we went with Kai.
Yeah.
And so, and if you would have told me prior to this, like, Terrance, there's a way that you could be closer to your child, I almost be like, are you kidding me? Like, right, not to toot my own horn, but like Father of the Year, like I take my kid everywhere. I do all sorts of things with him. Like, I don't even trip on it. He's at the door right now crying because he wants in, right? I never even really worry about it because to me it's like a blessing, and I get it a bit from like my dad was this way when he was around, and then my grandfather was really this way, which is like kids are never a burden. If he wants to go to the gym, he'd take us with. He just took us everywhere.
Yeah.
And so what I found so interesting was when this all went down, I actually did bond with my kid a lot closer than I think I could have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a new experience with me. I did not think, Kyle, that was possible.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Evie. It's like there's things that I do now. I'm just like, I don't know if I would have been like this, like with Garrett. And right, I mean, it's just the way it is. It's there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just the way that life, the hand that you're dealt. But I mean, I wouldn't have taken this amount of time off of work to be home with my daughter. I mean, they're just, or just the things that we do, and it just, get up in the middle of the night. I kind of would have been like, okay, Amanda, you deal with that. But now it's just like, we hear her crying. Like, there's times when we're really tired, but most times when she's crying, like, I'm up, I'm ready to feed her. When she's having her crying fits, it's a different story sometimes. Yeah. When I'm a little stressed out, when I'm tripping over the dog, trying to make dinner at the same time. I'm like, well, this is what stay-at-home moms feel like. I was like, well, now I can relate to them too. But it's only temporary for right now. But yeah, it's amazing. It brings you closer.
It does, and it's not like we're always going to be the perfect parents afterwards. Like,
no,
we still like parenthood means you will never ever be perfect, and sometimes you can still get frustrated with your child, right? But it doesn't make you a bad parent by any means. And I think it's just important to put it out there. Like everyone's, and you said it best, right? Like everyone goes through like their own walk and their own journey, and I think it's important to put out. There's that old saying, and I want to be very careful with this, so just hear me out, but let me fill it in. There's usually that negative saying that people will say, oh, well, misery loves company, right? And people say it in a very hateful way. And the reason why this always comes to mind is no one should have to feel this way. This is a very terrible thing, but at the same time, I hope, and I don't want to speak for you, but I hope to try to bring to some people some level of some type of comfort in whatever space that is appropriate for them in, to say, you know what, you're not alone. And even though this has happened, and I wish I could say I was alone in it, I never wish for that other person to be alone in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, I wish we could almost take the burden. I wish this was just a Kyle and Terrance situation. No one else would have experienced this. But if you're listening to this, like, look, take some sort of whatever works for you. And the fact that you're not alone, you can talk about it. You can choose not to talk about whatever it is, but try to have some comfort in that, if that makes any sense. I know I'm not necessarily articulating it the way I necessarily feel it.
No, it makes sense. It does.
Yeah, it's just a feeling.
Yeah, it's and I have to say, I think I kind of stole this from one of my best friends, his sister who went through this. But it's a club that no one wants to be a part of, filled with the most amazing people. And those people, some will talk about, some won't. But when you're with and in the presence of those people, like, there's a certain understanding that happens. And even for people who are family members of those people, like if you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you just break down crying, they understand. They're going to leave you alone. That's fine, And that's just one instance. If you have like an anger outbreak for no apparent reason, they're just kind of like, well, we can't. Those people they'll be like, well, we kind of get what's going on here, so let's just let him have his moment. Yeah, and there's this this atmosphere of kind of protection that you have. Once you've gone through it, that you're not alone, and there's other people that have gone through it, have seen it, have experienced it. Have had a front row seat to it, and will if at least kind of get what's going on, even if you can't verbalize it to them. So.
Oh man, I think you're 100%. And like to on a slight different path. I know we talked about this a little bit prior, but I know for me, I would say like dealing with things head on has been the hardest, but the best thing for me.
Yeah, and you definitely you hit it like a rhino. I would say.
Yeah, and look, it's hard because it forces me to a degree to be very transparent about how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. And again, you can, believe it or not, by all of you, again, people even who are listening, right? You and I, everyone who's listening, little do you know, sometimes by you being vulnerable and sharing your story and dealing with it head on, you actually help somebody deal with something that didn't do that, that kept it in, that didn't even tell family. Like I had one friend, I was, again, very surprised because people start opening up to you. And they hit me on Facebook Messenger, and they're like, look, when this happened to my husband and I, he felt the need that he didn't want to share it with the rest of the family. They didn't even really let anybody else know. They just kind of silently dealt with it. But and it challenged their marriage for a little bit because she felt that she wasn't allowed to express. And that she was so thankful that Victoria was willing to put her story out there the way she did, which is different than you and I. Like we're talking about it, mm-hmm. right? Audio, video, we're doing it this way. Victoria chose to do it her own way, but because she did share it, she inadvertently helped other people because it's almost like they feel like those feelings and stuff being addressed, and that they find some comfort to know that if they feel this way and they now feel some sort of relief that somebody was able to speak about it, that other ladies, other guys are going to, in a sense, kind of have that same sort of feeling that it's being addressed, that it's being acknowledged. I think is maybe the more appropriate way to put it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, 100%. So, well, Terrance, I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. And both of us being podcasters, we could probably go on for 2 and 3 hours, I'm sure, about both of our stories. And I think we're probably going to end up having you on another time once you get if you get that thing rolling with the hospitals and everything. We'll definitely share that with everybody once that comes out. But you have your podcast, and I guess this switches gears a little bit. What's the name of your podcast, and how can people kind of get a hold of you on that?
Oh, so interesting that you said that as I went through revamping. So mine is, so I do one it's called Those Conspicuous Millennials. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because when the whole pregnancy situation started, I've dropped off for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm actually kind of glad maybe you're coming to a conclusion with this because while you can find me there, I will say something that has really done is reinvigorate my realization. Look, tomorrow is never guaranteed, right? Like I kiss my child every night when I am home. Like we have a memorial set up mm-hmm. for Kai, mm-hmm. and so I have like knocks. I'm like, okay, blow your brother kisses, right? Do these things, and this is further ingrained in me. Like, man, like I gotta live life. You know what I'm saying? Like even though a part of me really wanted to be in this dark place, and yes, I want to be very clear on that. I wanted to be in this dark place because again, it's my way of acknowledging that pain and that fear of having to still move on, and that he is not necessarily going to be here, and getting to that move with situation. We gotta do the things that we love, and exactly. You know what, my son Garrett as well, right? These are our children that we love. They will never be forgotten. They're always going to be a part of our lives. And so me doing things like my podcast, you doing things that you're doing like on yours right now, this platform, and even for your listeners, the things that they love to do, give, embrace it and do it, because exactly. Look, life is beautiful and it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, anything can happen at any given time. So they're more than welcome to go there. I know I specifically try to talk about like I love technology, and I can't talk about products directly because of my job.
Right, yeah.
So I have to shy away from that. But what I can talk about is how it affects us. And it's so interesting because after everything that's happened, now I have a whole different view on how technology affects us, politics, right, all sorts of different things. I take a whole total different view. And I wouldn't say necessarily agnostic one, and just like to give you like just a little
Yeah.
sneak. I was talking about necessarily how like voting, right? Like how we could do this sort of thing from a mobile platform, like everyone should have access to
Hmm.
it, blah blah blah. But also, when people say, "Oh, well, you must be a Republican or you must be a Democrat," my view is no, I'm all of these things
Yeah.
because we're all in the same boat. We all want the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Let's not be separated and divided. We all want our kids to do well. We all want to live in a clean environment, right? And
Right.
there's, yes, these little nuances here, but we got to talk about how cohesively we can bring it together
Hmm.
and not be so separate. So I try to use my platform to talk about how technology should bring us together, not separate us in a tough time where now the fact that Kyle, you can reach somebody on the other side of the world, that you could talk to somebody in India tomorrow face to face. This is something that humanity has never been able to do. And there's always that question, were we and are we really ready for this because of the beautiful things that it causes, but also the divide and some of
Yeah.
the emotional and physical destruction that
Yeah.
can be. That's a very powerful word, but it's true.
Yeah.
And so I like to try to find those positive things. So anyways, that's what my vibe is all about. It's going to take a slight little change here just because of my personal experiences, but again, I think it can be a beautiful platform. So I'm glad you asked about it,
Yeah.
and I'll take this as a challenge to make sure to continue to do things I love. So
That
thank
was
you.
that was the other thing because I was thinking like with me like this is episode 11. It's been a little while since episode 10, and just before this I was thinking like I really need to put I need to get back on track with this, and I was kind of wondering if you were in that same boat. It sounds like you were, so
Oh,
I'm glad we got to talk about that. But
yes, and not to deviate, but like something, and for your listeners, like they know this, right? Like just a true platform. Consistency is the basis of everything, right?
yeah,
If you want to lose weight or build muscle in the gym, you got to consistently eat
right.
right. Consistently go to gym. If you want to learn a new skill, let's say computer programming, you have to consistently spend 30 minutes a day learning it, no matter what, right? Like you got to dedicate it to it. Same things for me. Since July, I've not been consistent
Yeah,
on my posts. But again, I'm just going to try to find some positivity to say, you know what? I'm not only doing this for myself, I'm doing this for Knox, I'm doing this for Kai, I'm doing it for just my love of humanity, right? And wanting people to be able to connect and just share their different life experiences.
well, that's awesome, man. Well, Terrence, thank you for coming on and sharing Kai's story today, and hopefully, I hope you're a different and feel like a different and better person after this,
Oh,
this hour and a half
100%.
or so. And I can't thank you enough, and thank you for agreeing to come on.